This video is going to be all about sound design and creating a really interesting bass sound using the new synthesizer Trip that's contained within the Halion Sonic SE in Cubase 7.5. So this is a new introduction, this synth engine, and I think it's really interesting actually. Let me show you the sound that I created. So this is just put in context with a little musical idea. This is the sound in isolation. Now, the reason why it sounds as it does is because of something called oscillator sync. Now, I don't have time to go into this in great detail, so I'm going to refer you to an article, and this is on the Sound on Sound site. Now, what it does is oscillator sync introduces a really interesting texture into the sound, and there's a lot more flexibility than your traditional oscillator waveforms, you know, your sine, your sawtooth, your pulse wave, and your triangle. And you can really hear that in this example. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through those steps that I went through to create this, and I can't remember precisely what they were, so I'm just going to make a duplicate of the track, and we're going to do this here. This is going to obviously load up an identical instance, but I'm going to start the process from scratch. Let's just bring this onto solo, and I'm going to open up the Halion Sonic SE2, and you can see here Trip is visible. This is the new synth engine, but this is with the settings that I created on there. So I want to wipe the slate clean, and so to do that I'm just going to drop this down. You can see that I've got here the search category init, which is an abbreviation for initialized, and I would suggest when you're working with a synth and you want to do some sound design, it's always a good idea to start from scratch. So you could see that there. So we've got here the option of init trip. I'm going to double click that, and we're starting again. All right, so this is what the sound is like with just the sine wave. There's also a reverb on there. Okay, I'm going to bypass that for the moment. Now the sine wave is a very simple waveform. All right, let me just open this up. I'm going to drag the channel strip over, so you can see here on the spectrum analyzer a representation of the sound. We got 20 Hertz at bottom left, up to 20 kilohertz on the far right hand side here. So you can see it's existing in this kind of low area, and the sine wave is a very simple sound. Okay, we want to make it a bit more interesting. So to do that, let's take a look then at the options with sync. Okay, so you can see here the waveform is a sine wave. I'm going to drop this down. We're going to go to sine sync and have a listen to what happens, and also watch the spectrum analysis on the left hand side. Now this is where I ended up, 27. Look at all these extra texture. It sounds different, the emphasis is different, but we've lost some bottom end. So what I did was take the octave down. Let me just do that again. We've got a really nice gritty, buzzy texture to the sound there, which is a really good foundation. Now I'm just going to refer back to my previous version here. I haven't memorized all these steps like I said, and let's bring this one up so we can take a look. I've got this on my other monitor. I'm going to bring it over here. So let's take a look, and we can compare what's going on with the settings here. So you can see that I had my sine or sync on the first oscillator set to 27 with the waveform here. This is a variation in terms of the texture you can hear coming through. And the other thing that I've got is another oscillator. So this is another one set to the oscillator sync, and this one is set to a different waveform amount, and then also coarse tuning +3. So let's introduce this into the new Trip instance over here. So we'll do the same again. Let's take this away. So we were 73 and then +3. The level was a bit different too. And let's make sure we've got the right EQ visible. Once again, it's gone on my other monitor. I'm just going to drag this over, and let's bring this instance to the foreground. Funnily enough, I've just forgotten the settings, but it doesn't matter. Let's drop this down. So we've got a new oscillator. In fact, I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me just put this up to the +3. I always experiment with different tunings when I'm working with sounds to create extra texture. So this was the octave, okay? This is semitones. So in essence, what we're doing is creating a chord. Let's have a listen. going to take the octave up so you can hear it. So I quite like that vibe, all right? But when I was playing around with it, I switched to the sine sync, and let's have a listen. Can you hear that texture coming through now? We've got almost this nice kind of chord, extra note coming through. And that's starting to sound really interesting, much more contemporary. Let me reference once again. I really should have written the settings down here, shouldn't I? But, you know, I'm a bit of a slacker sometimes. You would have seen that from other videos on my channel. Where did I end up? Right, so it was 73. Let me increase this. And let me just see if I can type that in. I haven't tried this yet. No, that's not working. Let me just do this. 73, there we go. And then the level is important. Let's adjust that in a second, all right? I just want to check my other settings, because you know what I was thinking was that sounded too buzzy for me. I wanted to kind of round it off. And so I actually worked with the filter, and you can see my settings over here. Let's have a listen. So we can hear the extra texture to the sound. Let me bring my cutoff down. Let me get my filter settings correct. And what we need to do is we need to get this working with the actual filter. So we come down to the envelope amount and increase this. So what that's doing is adding that nice kind of twang to the sound. Now at the moment the emphasis is too much on the second oscillator. So let's bring it down. So it's rebalancing the level of each oscillator, giving us a more balanced overall sound, I think. Now, the icing on the cake was the reverb. Let me turn it back on. So we've got a nice contemporary bass sound. What I'll do is I'll take the original off and let's have a listen in context. There was one other thing you might be thinking to yourselves, it's just slightly out. I'm going to solo this. What it is I added distortion into the filter section. So this adds a real extra dimension to it. It's very subtle. Have a listen. Just exaggerating there. I can't remember exactly how much it was, but it's always nice to experiment with adding a little bit of distortion into a filter section. Let me just quickly refer back to the original instance and we can double check on here. Let's take a look. Right, 36%. Let's see, pretty much. Let me bring this up. I want to get this precisely the same. You know, when you're doing a little journey in terms of sound design, you never know where we're going to end up, and it's not always with a lot of thought. You know, you just kind of vibe on it, and so that's what was going on here. So here we go. Once again, let's have a listen. So it's a really interesting little synthesizer tucked away inside the Halion Sonic SE version 2. So I'd encourage you to check it out. And there are some other features on here actually that I haven't had time to delve into properly yet. I'm just going to bring this over so you could take a look. We've got the arpeggiator, various other modulation options, a sub oscillator. These are all interesting elements to check out. So remember also this is a multi-timbral instrument, so you could have each program receiving on its own MIDI channel. So you can set these up over here. So you could stack together 16 of these simultaneously. So that's a lot of power from this single instrument. Okay, so check it out. I will definitely be taking a look at some other features of Trip in future videos.